Hello again, everybody. I'm Phil Liggett, along with Paul Sherwen, who 6 times was a rider in this event and now joins me in the co-commentary. Paul, this has always been a race of hope for many riders over here.
It's always been a race for the great sprinters, and the great sprinter won last year, Tom Steele's announcing that he's going to be the sprinter for the next few years. I think he's got to be favourite again today.
Well, last year, Tom Steele, in fact, won 8 events. This year, he's already won 5. Now, will we see Johan Museeuw work for him today?
I think that's the par for the course for Johan Museeuw. He worked for him very hard last year. He's tried in the Tour of Flanders to take his victory out there. He didn't. I think today he will work for Tom Steele's, and maybe on Sunday the roles will be reversed.
Well, let's go and find out what Tom Steele's has got to say. This is the array of machinery of the team, and Paul Sherwen now has Tom with him.
It's always been a good race for the Mapei team. You've got a lot of good riders around to help you. You feel confident coming down to the sprint?
Yeah, when it comes to a sprint, I think we have maybe the strongest team to prepare the sprint. The last 10 kilometers, there are some strong boys who can keep the speed very high, so you're pretty comfortable to go to the sprint.
Well, Henk, here on your chin, you're actually bearing the scars of Tour of Flanders. That was a great ride by yourself.
Yeah, I was happy how the day went, and just a little bit of luckiness at 20k to go when I crashed when I was chasing from Monkas, and around the corner my front wheel just slipped and went down. Managed to get back on, but just didn't have the legs to go over that last climb, that mule with the guys, but managed to finish 15, so I was happy.
But this year we seem to be seeing a new Henk Vogels, because last year with the Rabobank team things didn't seem to go quite the well you wanted to, but now on Ghent you seem quite happy.
Yeah, the last couple of years I had a lot of injury troubles and just couldn't put it together. This year I've had no trouble with the injuries. Had a lot of 1,000-kilometre weeks, and have had a really good atmosphere in the team, a good trainer, and yeah, just the way I ride, I think I can just get better and better for the year, and I'm really, really happy with the team and the year so far.
What about a sprinter like Frederik Moncassin? He has to be looked after when it comes to the end of a race like Ghent Wevelgem. You've got to make sure he gets to the right place at the right time.
Actually, Fred's not your average sprinter. He's somebody who's incredible in a bunch when it comes down to the finish. He goes through gaps like I've never seen before, and you just cannot follow the guy. When you ask him whether he needs some help, he says no, he just follows the other sprinters, and it's very hard to follow him in the bunch. The only person I've seen look after him is Eros Poli, because he's so big and he just knocks everyone out the way. So he really only needs sort of one person to look after him, so that gives us a bit more of a chance, and it works in his way because we can attack and they have to chase and he can sprint. So he's an excellent sprinter, and he's not just a sprinter. For somebody to finish second in Tour of Flanders, that's not a sprinter, so he's superb form at the moment, so today's his day.
Well, that was Henk Vogels. Now, let's seek out Mario Cipollini, the fastest man in the world, he tells us. Back to Paul.
But it's always a very difficult race, Ghent Wevelgem, because at the end it comes together. There's always a lot of good sprinters.
Yeah, there's always a problem after the camel. A great peloton is coming back, and then you have a lot of good sprinters. Today we don't have Blijlevens in our team, so we're going to try to do an escape or something like that.
So we have to look for Peter van Petergem in the last 5 kilometres.
I hope so.
And why not? Winner of Het Volk already, and a favourite now for this one. But what about Frankie Andreu? He too will try hard today, right, Frankie?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a good shot. You just got to get over the Kimmel, and so you're right. It's more for a sprinter race, and we're actually going to be trying to help Christophe Capel today to see what happens.
Give us some idea about how you ride a race that climbs the Kimmel 2 times.
It's position. A lot of it's position, because the climb is maybe only 300, 400 meters long, so it's not that long. But harder than the climb is the fight before it. You're going 60 kilometers an hour, and you're already at your threshold before you even hit the climb for the last 15 kilometers before you get to the climb. And it's all that fight for position. And once you get out, hit the pave, you just got to try to make it over with the first group.
You just need that one little sort of nudge to bring your morale right to the top, because Eddie says you can ride much better than you do.
Eddie say that. Yeah, I know it. He say that, but I don't know how it happens. Eddie say, and Walter say also, that it's much more inside me than going out. But maybe it's coming now. I was 8 now in the Ronde van Vlaanderen, and maybe now it's a good year, a good year for me.
Well, that was Joe Plankett. Now let's join the race. And this is the route of the race and the series of small hills. We go round the Kemmelberg twice on this course before we break away and head down into Wevelgem. A ride of 208 kilometres for the riders, and this one of the famous Belgian classics as well. 2 climbs of the Monteberg, 2 climbs of the Kemmelberg. And the riders who have been setting the pace from very early on today, 2 leaders at the moment, Wim van der Meulenhof, number 206, and Carl Powels, he rides number 27. They've had a maximum lead of 6 minutes and 30 seconds, and it looks as though they are going to take this race down onto the first climb of the Kemmelberg. And we join the action now on the first ascent of the Kemmelberg, a climb of 500 metres with a maximum gradient of 18%, taking us 51 metres above sea level, about 160 feet. But it's steep. A massive crowd enjoying a spring day here in Ghent Wevelgem. And the 2 leaders that have got us here first, Wim van der Meulenhof and Carl Powels. And the lead has been over 6.5 minutes, Paul, but right now to the main group containing Museo and Co, it's around about 3.5 minutes.
Well, I think that's about normal for the course, because the main field behind now will be accelerating to get themselves into a good position to attack this very strategic part of the course. But I do have to say these 2 riders at the moment are not on the steepest part of the Kemmel, because the 18% part is up at the top after this left-hand bend that they're going to take in a moment, and you'll see them getting out of the saddle very shortly, suffering to drag themselves over the top of this climb.
And we'll get a better view of what Paul is talking about when they get round this corner here. It's a superb crowd, though, and enjoying themselves immensely. That's the great thing about Ghent Wevelgem, is that you can come out and watch them climb this mountain twice before they peel off down to Wevelgem for the finish.
These 2 riders are really trying to survive at the moment, because they know the gap is coming down quite rapidly. There's 1 rider behind them at the moment, Tim Lennart, and I do believe that Ken Hashikawa, who was in the original group of 3 riders, is still holding off the main field, but surely he will be back in the fold as these riders get over the top of the Kemmelberg for the first time.
Well, there's the magic gap appearing at the summit of the Kemmelberg. Then they make the long descent over the cobblestones. Well, it's dry today, so they shouldn't be too dangerous. It looks like Bruno Thibaut, who's on the counter-attack here from Cofidis, the new team on the block this year. And a Frenchman as well. They could do with a nice win right now, because they're really suffering from the illness of Lance Armstrong and the injury to Maurizio Fondriest.
He's just going over the top of the Monteberg. You can see the main field here on the slopes of the Monteberg too. And surprisingly enough, Phil, there's no real sense of urgency at the moment. And normally, when you come to this part of Ghent Wevelgem, you can see one or another team starting to put the pressure on, starting to string it out a little bit, because from there it's only a kilometre to the top of the Kemmel. These 2 riders now taking the descent, and a very scary descent it is indeed, 20%.
Now, dodging to the right, I think it's Ken Hashikawa who's tucked away. No, it's Tim Lennart. He's 3rd man on the road at the moment, just a young new professional, 22 years of age. Now sampling the real big-time atmosphere of a Belgian classic. And this is one of the biggest crowds I've seen on the mountain here.
Certainly has a lot to do with the fact that the weather is extraordinarily good for Belgium at this time of the year. I don't think I've ever known it. Up about 25 degrees Celsius, that's around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So it really is a warm summer day for Belgium as Lennart get to the very difficult part of the Kemmelberg. The crowd waiting to see how much he's going to suffer, but behind the main field certainly must be starting to accelerate a little bit now, and they're already there. There's Mario Cipollini at the top of the screen and Johan Museo at the bottom.
Well, I've got Lennart's pegged at around 2.5 minutes. We're going back to about 3 minutes here to Museo and Cipollini. And it's unusual to see Big Mario at the front, but you know, this is the sort of event he's been involved with at the finish before. But look at the speed now of Museo. He's down in the centre and he's chasing, I think it's Thibaut he's just come across on the right. Caption saying Andre Schmill has had a puncture at the same time. He's behind the race. Now look at this, the big man, the world champion who disappeared mysteriously almost in Het Volk when he seemed to be figuring on a victory. By the way, the very next day he did win Kuurne Brussels Kuurne, so he bounced back in a big way. Now he's looking for a victory here in Ghent Wevelgem. Now take a close look. Here's Henk Vogels at some of the faces on these riders. There's Cipollini. Robin McEwen goes round on the back wheel of the big sprinter.
Well, once again, that caption had to be wrong there, announcing the puncture. There was a Lotte rider put his hand in the air, but I have seen, in fact, Andre Schmill go through. But look at the power here of the strongest man in the classics, the man of the 1990s, I would say. There, coming across to him, second in Tour of Flanders just a few days ago, Frederik Moncassin trying to get into the slipstream of Johan Museeuw, and there, in fact, is Shamil, so he can't have had a flat tyre.
No, there was a Lotto rider in trouble. It wasn't Shamil. He's right up near the front. Here comes Mario Cipollini, still working hard on the climb. And just look at some of the faces on these riders now. They're just going to close their eyes and suffer over the top, make the fast descent, and then they'll all be round here again in no time at all.
Really is a question of care, says Eric Zabel, just going through, the winner of the first round of the World Cup in Milan-San Remo. But all of these riders at the moment in the latter part of the peloton just surviving, trying to get to the top and hoping that they can catch up. The man who's setting the pace, though, Johan Museeuw, on the very steep descent of the Kemmelberg and trying to get across. There is Frederik Moncassin. This man is certainly turning out to be a man of the classics.
Well, this calls for concentration as they come down the mountain here.
Tell you one thing, Phil, this descent is a very scary one, because basically you just let go of the brakes, point the bike in the right direction, and your eyes are vibrating so much you can hardly see where you're going. And here is an update of exactly what's going on in the race there. You can see 2:35 is the gap to Liggett, so he can't be very far in front of the duo here of Museeuw and Frederik Moncassin. In fact, it looks very much as if he's just at the top of the screen there, so it wasn't the minute gap that he thought he had.
And Museeuw and Moncassin have got themselves clear of the field, and this is a very interesting move now. Two riders going away early on, and two strong teams this year. Ghent is also an extremely good team for the Classics this year. They've been prominent all of the time. There is Liggett. He's going to get a bit of a shock when he sees the world champion go by him, and there's got nothing in those legs to raise the pace. And Museeuw, I think, actually kept the pressure on there to make sure that young Liggett couldn't get his wheel as he went through.
You could certainly say that was a clean cut, because there was no chance at all of him getting into the slipstream of this flying duo at the moment. You always have to remark, though, at the strength of Johan Museeuw. This man is consistent from the very start of the year right through until the end. He's always present, always capable of racing at the highest level. Very few riders can do that these days. Only men like Sean Kelly used to do that several years ago. But the modern professional cyclist seems to be a man who picks up either the early season classics, the late classics, or one of the major tours. But Museeuw is one of the rare men who can ride a full season.
Now, it's either coincidence or, in fact, Moncassin is not helping here in this chase, because as we come into the village of Kemmel, every time we come back to these two, we only see Museeuw doing the driving. And I'm just wondering, Paul, if, well, as we speak here now, Moncassin has gone through to the front. They're closing in on those two leaders pretty quickly. We haven't seen what's happening back in the main bunch for a few minutes.
This is the town of Kemmen, a left-hand turn here, and they'll be out into the open roads again, and it is a very windy area around here. It's known as the Heuvelland, and there's some wonderful roads for cycling around here, very narrow roads where mainly only cyclotourists go during the summer months, and these two riders will know this area very well. Most of the teams stay not too far away from here during the classic season and train along these roads. The two riders now, you can see, starting to get a little bit pained in their actions. They're starting to roll their shoulders quite a bit, the first sign, in fact, that they're starting to weaken somewhat, and trying just to survive a little bit longer if they can stay away around this circuit to the bottom of the Kemmel for the next time. They could find themselves in the front group. But these two men trying to open up a gap, and looking back there, Phil, down the road, you can see the main field, so they haven't exactly opened up too much of an advantage yet.
Well, Moncassin now is riding well. These are the World Cup rankings, world rankings rather, the riders. Number 3 in the world is Johan Museeuw right now. That World Championship victory giving him a nice leg up the overall standings in world rankings.
Interesting to see, in fact, Johan Museeuw, one of the older riders in the peloton now, one of the ambassadors of the sport, and he too has adopted some of the new technology by taking those spinacci bars, the little clip-ons that give the riders an aerodynamic position when they get down into that tuck formation there on these long straight roads, with another group coming across here. Looks very much to me as if that's Stuart O'Grady in second position, riding for the Ghent team. So everybody panicking, grasping, trying to get up there to Johan Museeuw, because this is a similar tactic to the one he adopted last year in Ghent Wevelgem when he tried to blow the field apart, but It always seems to come back together in Ghent Wevelgem because there's 30 kilometers from the final climb of the Mont Kemmel down to the finish.
So there's André Schmil. But they're going to want to get back up to Johan Museo and Mont Cassin, and that's what the effort is at the moment. And while they chase down those two, then the two leaders are going to find it very difficult to stay away. Both riders having just one win to their name last year. And for Van der Meulenhof, that was a win in a stage in the Tour of Austria. And a small Belgian Kermesse race at Eeklo was the reward for Carl Powell. So they're not big winners to say the least, but they are having the guts to go out there and try and change the shape of Ghent Wevelgem today.
That's Ludwig Willems, the Lotto rider there, trying to get across. Here is the gap. It's coming down consistently now from Powell's and Van der Meulenhof. 2 minutes 34 to the two chasers, but I think now they will see the main field behind them and realise that they're not going to open up the gap as easily as possible. On this circuit, the roads are very long and very straight, so the main field has their prey in sight all of the time.
Yes, the reaction there caused a counter-reaction from the field. They've come back together. Cofidis are now trying to change the shape of things here. And the Cofidis team are going to be first to pull back the world champion. A nice show of defiance by Johan Museo. Sometimes using the springboard of the Kemmelberg, you do get away with it, but it looks as though today it's not going to be. There's a small group now got itself detached from the main field. I think Henk Vogels is in this move as well.
Second position there, Francis Moreau, gold medalist at the Olympic Games last year, riding for France. But it is interesting to note that Cofidis does seem to be taking an awful lot of attention in this race here today. They had a good win at the weekend in a small French race, the Grand Prix de Rennes, by Nicolas Jalabert, the brother of Laurent. And you see they're being very attentive to the movements of Frédéric Moncassin and Johan Museo. Another move coming down here by the Polti team. In fact, everybody wants to get clear, but nobody wants to work together.
Now the field are getting themselves back together here. They don't look to me as though they're too concerned about all the movement that's going on around them. But I think anybody that wants to be in for the finale of this race today are going to have to make the move on the next climb up the Kemmelberg, because after that, it's every man for himself on the race back to Wevelgem. Well, these are the two leaders now. They're approaching the second climb of the Monteberg. There it is, 9% at its steepest point, 800 metres. It's the stepping stone to the Kemmelberg. And now you can probably hear from the sirens that the field are finally getting to grips with this breakaway and slowly but surely hauling them in. I think they'll be very lucky to be in the lead by the time we get to the Kemmelberg now.
Well, they could only have hoped to survive to the top of the Kemmelberg and then stay in the front group, because I think the hammer really has gone down in the main field now, and you can see the main field. Leading them out is the TVM squad. The gap now down to just 52 seconds after having reached a maximum of 6.5 minutes, and TVM trying to put their men up at the front here. Men like Jesper Skibbe are in the field this afternoon. He'll be looking to try and leap away on the climb of the Kemmelberg here, but you can see there's a lot more urgency this time as they approach the Kemmel than there was last time.
Well, TVM, having had that marvellously successful Het Volk race won by Peter van Petergem and placing 3 riders in the top 4 finishers, they're feeling pretty sharp right now.
This is Jesper Skibbe, the Danish rider. Very successful career he's had too, although always been dogged by a certain amount of accidents over the last few years, but still managed to fight his way back. There in second position is the winner of Het Volk, Peter van Petergem. Another of the TVM riders moving up into third place. Fourth there, you can see the red shirt of the Lotto rider André Schmil. And interestingly enough, Phil, there are not very many Mapei GB riders at the front of the race.
And certainly not in evidence is Johan Museo. The race being led there by Tristan Hoffmann of TVM. Now these are the two brave escapers of the day. It's been an awful long day out in front, but I think the agony is shortly to be over, because there it is. The big field almost have them back. And once over the Monteberg here, we'll be heading down the narrow lane that leads us onto the Kemmelberg and the left-hand turn. Just 20 seconds now. Henk Vogels on the left of our picture for Gan. He's got himself back into a very good position. Very difficult, and they've stopped the team cars too. They've been pulled off, so there's nothing between the bunch and the breakaway now. But you know, you come up to this climb and an attack by Axel Merckx. He's shot out of the pack there. Axel Merckx wants to reach them first.
Well, the man who's got to live with such a great reputation of his father is starting to make his own reputation. Axel Merckx, 24 years of age. He finished in the top rankings of last year's Tour of Spain. He just missed finishing in the top 10, but he's a very consistent rider. Surprising to see him riding a race like Ghent Wevelgem. I thought he would have been down there in the Tour of Pays Basque preparing for Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but opting to ride the Belgian Classic. But look at the size of Axel, well over 6 feet tall and a lot bigger, towers over his father, and he certainly is a rider in his own right. You can see how he's improved in the world rankings over the last few years, from 490th up to 58th.
And there is the gap he's now trying to bridge. If he can get up to these two leaders, he would probably like somebody to come and join him, because by the time he catches those two, he knows they are going to be too tired to be of much use to him. He needs more strength. Somebody else has tried to get away from the pack. And when we get down there, we'll find out who that is. And the gap has opened for the moment. A lot of people are holding back now. They're waiting for the Kemmelberg itself to put in an attack. And Merckx has pre-opted to go a little bit earlier here, and that might be a good move. This is the little link lane now that takes us down to the Kemmel.
Well, he's caught out one or two of those motorbike referees there, because he's just managed to get into the slipstream a little bit. He knows those two riders are in front. He's not worried about them anymore, because he knows when he gets to the Kemmelberg, he will be flying past them. There again is the profile of the Kemmel, 18% at the top. Only a climb of 51 meters, but I can tell you, Phil, it's very difficult at the top.
And this is the left turn, and this crowd's getting bigger by the minute. But they've all actually come down the mountain here now, because they want the shortcut to get out of town quick to try and see the finish down in Wevelgem. But there they are, onto the climb now, and we've got Axel Merckx, the famous name in world cycling, especially as far as Belgium is concerned. But this is Axel now as he tries to drive on up the mountain.
Well, he can only use that little piece of dirt at the bottom, because once you get to the higher slopes of the Kemmelberg, in fact, there's a metal cable there to keep the crowds back, forcing the rides. In fact, there is Museo. We didn't see him on the Monteberg, but it looks as if Museo now has leapt out of that main field.
The two leaders, Van der Meulenhof and Pauwels, have been caught first by Axel Merckx at least. He goes straight by them. They take a look at him. I don't think they're going to do much about it, though. And right behind, we can see now the race being led by Johan Museo. And also in that lead group, I think we've got Grady, André Schmil as well.
Jackie Durand, the Frenchman here riding for Casino, he's riding an excellent race too, but Museo leapt out of the main field quite quickly there, but then seemed to slow down. There's Frédéric Moncassin, Stuart O'Grady and André Schmil for Lotto, but you can see the faces on the riders here, a little bit more pain in their legs than there was, I think, the last time we came over the Kemmel. Axel Merckx is going to make the Belgians very happy here as he gets to the steepest part of the Kemmelberg, and you see he actually has to get out of the saddle, pulling on those bars to get every last little bit of effort into his machine.
And in fact, the other two breakaways are passing right down the bus now and heading back into the peloton as the rest of the riders scrabble up here. But again, Paul, apart from Axel Merckx, nobody is actually ripping away from this field, and it looks as though, you know, they're going to come over the top and possibly regroup here for a big sprint down in Wevelgem.
There's Tom Steels just going through the picture there with Mario Cipollini, the big sprinters, and that is what they are gambling on, the fact that nobody can actually make a gap over the top of the Kemmelberg here. It will all come back together, and this will live up to its reputation as being one of the classics for the sprinters. But you can see, just looking further down the pack, how hard it is for some of the light runners of this Ghent Wevelgem race here, as Axel Merckx goes down the descent of the Kemmelberg for the last time.
Right, Merckx taking the risks on the descent now. This is the chase group led by Tristan Hoffman over the top.
In fact, that was Peter van Piet again. Tristan Hoffman in 5th position there, and they have got a little bit of a gap, but maybe it's not going to be big enough as Sergei Uchikov comes through there now. That bottle going off there is a very dangerous thing for the riders on these cobblestones. If you just caught that with your front wheel, it could cause a very nasty accident.
And the less brave, leaving plenty of gaps between the wheels to see where they're going. They know that they'll regroup once they get down the bottom anyway.
But there, in fact, is a very serious group forming behind Axel Merckx there, and I'm sure we can see Johan Museo in the group, just sitting on the front there. In fact, is one of the TVM riders. I think that'll be Peter van Piet again, because I did see him in the group there, and the larger man in the yellow jersey will also be Tristan Hoffman, the former champion of Holland.
Now this is the chase group, chasing a man whose father won this event on 3 occasions in his career. Merckx would be happy with just one right now, and he's been caught, he's latched on, And now we've got 3, 6, 8 riders down in that group. We've certainly got Museu, Moncassin, Van der Merlenhof, Van Petergem, Schmill, Hoffman, and I think O'Grady is the Australian there, the other GAN rider in there.
This rider trying to come across here. It may well be that this is Laurent Debian. They certainly are trying to put the men in all of the groups today, but the main field still very attentive. Nobody's sitting up at all at the moment. They realise the race is far from being played out. 30 kilometres to go from the top of the Kemmelberg, and that is around about 45 minutes of racing.
There's the full composition. It is as we gave it to you. Museu, Schmill, Merckx, Van Petergem, Hoffman, Van der Merlenhof. And you'll note here there are 2 riders from the TVM squad and 2 riders from the GAN team. And that is an interesting move. But Andre Schmill on the right of our picture here is such a consistent rider. He is a most amazing character. And there is one rider now just bridged up for Cofidis. And it looks to me as though it is, as Paul said, Laurent Debian.
Well, Museu deciding he's not too happy about having a big field together, and he's going to try and go again. But in fact, I think he preempted the attack that was going down the right-hand side of the road. Museu obviously looking for a breakaway today. He doesn't want to leave it up to the sprint, because the thing about Ghent Wevelgem, it's such a risky event when it comes down to the final few kilometres. You come into the town, there are lots of cars parked on the left and the right-hand side of the road, and many riders have in fact lost their Paris-Roubaix on the Wednesday before in Ghent Wevelgem because of a crash.
Now the pressure staying on at the front, but the main field are just on the back of the elastic here. They're not far out of it at all. 1 or 2 new riders have got themselves across into the lead group, including Fabrizio Guidi. He wants some action. This is Henk Vogels here. Henk's having a great start to the season, joining the GAN team this winter. And you can see that there's a group there now. There's something like 18 or 19 riders, and despite the flat roads, they've managed with sheer speed to split up the main peloton. Still riders taking their chance. They realise now this is the decisive phase of Ghent Wevelgem. They're off the mountains. They've got to re-establish themselves at the front, and it looks like the only way they're going to do that is by getting across on the groups as quickly as possible. And again, another attack has been launched off the front of the pack.
Fabrizio Guidi trying to go clear again. Museu was trying to get across to him, but it is strange to see, Phil, that every time a group forms, it's actually too big, which is why nobody's working together, and there's a little bit of a pause caused, and then the groups are coming back from behind, and the whole situation keeps repeating itself. But Johan Museu being very attentive, looking for the breakaway. That's Uchikov now coming to the front. He's putting the pressure on, trying to see if he can get away in a small breakaway. But Fabrizio Guidi is also the kind of man I'm surprised to see trying to attack today, because he's got a great sprint finish. He's won a stage of the 3 days of La Panna already, and last year, for me, he was one of the sprinting revelations of the season.
And I make it 19 riders have got clear in this group, and we're around about 20 kilometres from the finish, maybe slightly more. Well, there's the gap. It's no more than 200 or 300 metres. It sometimes looks closer from the angle of our television cameras, but you can see by the way this race is going at the front in a straight line. The main field are packing, and this is where the teammates can actually back off the whole field, because the roads are so narrow. If one team gets to the front, it makes it very difficult for anybody else to move. It looks as though, is it Telecom who are trying to get back on term here, because they haven't got anybody up front.
Obviously the big losers, and their man Eric Zabel on the start line this morning, a great sprinter. He'll be looking for a victory if they can get it all back together, which is why the rest of the field now are leaving it to the men in pink to try and pull that big group back again. But I don't think there were any Rabobank riders in the group there either, which is why we've got this Dutchman coming to the front too to try and pick it up. And there, the camera giving us an idea of the sort of speed that these riders attain on these very small Belgian roads.
The Srinio rider sitting there on the front, Fabrizio Guidi, the world champion, right behind him. Then Andre Schmiel in 3rd place. The gap is only 28 seconds, but that is on the ascendancy, and so that's not, they can take courage from that.
They would feel a lot happier if they could stretch it out to around about the 1 minute mark, because that would allow the team managers to come by the main pack there, so they could get some information as to exactly who was chasing behind, because for the moment these riders are a little bit in no man's land. They're not sure exactly what teams are taking up the chase. They're not sure if the chase is in earnest or if they are doing the right thing by being in this break of 19 men. It does seem, though, as if a lot of riders want this break to succeed. This is Mario Sierra on the front, riding for the Saeco team. Normally he would be riding for his own teammate Mario Cipollini, so he should maybe back off a little bit and not do too much at the front, because Cipollini is trapped in the main field.
And Cipollini, twice a winner of this race, once at the expense of Jamaluddin Abdu Japarov, which I was there on that occasion. I thought that the referees were very hard on Abdu Japarov in disqualifying him from his victory that day over Cipollini.
Sign there indicating 20 kilometres to go for these riders. It's still Aki and Telecom at the front trying to pull it back together, but they're not getting any help from the rest of the men in this field. Obviously, they realise that the chances are very difficult of pulling back on a 19-man breakaway, so they've got to try and do everything that they can. I think Erik Zabel will be sitting comfortably in this group and hoping that his teammates can pull it back together. One neutral service car behind the leading group of 19, and it looks as if Aki are doing a very good job here, Phil, because that looks a lot less than 28 seconds to me.
No, they're bringing them back, and I think it's because the lead group is still not working properly together. They've got the workers, the resters, and they're not really sorting themselves out. Now let's get back to the chase group here, because this is the Aki riders in full cry now, and this is Michelangelo Coase. And the gap coming down from 28 to 19 seconds. Rabobank are also going to work, so too are Telecom. There's the Rabobank working. And three very strong teams here trying to reduce this, and it normally means curtains for the big breakaway. 173 is Brian Holm, the man who loves these early season classics, from Denmark, another true worker of the team. And number 185 is Max van Hestwijk. He was of Motorola and still a young man making his way in the big teams. A lot of talent in those legs. He's yet to show it to us, but we've seen flashes of brilliance from Max in the past.
I think now with these three big teams chasing at the front, it must certainly be the end of the breakaway there of 19 riders, because these three teams, I think, have decided they want to work together as friends for the moment, because they all have a common cause, that is bringing the whole field back together so that we can have, as always in Ghent Wevelgem, a big tumultuous bunch finish. You can see everybody sharing, but it's very difficult indeed there. One man has just let the wheel go by, and they've got to start the whole rhythm of the chain once again.
Yes, well, he won't be very welcome in the line next time around, because that does create the problem. Telecom are using some good men here, and so too. This is the man they're hoping to carry to the finish. They know that Erik has got the sprint in his legs if they can get him there. Winner of Milan-San Remo, having a tremendous start to the season. Winning races almost at his will, but he's got to get up to that front group to do anything about it today.
In fact, information coming over the radio there that Erik Zabel has just had a flat tyre in this group, so that's not going to be too good for him. Rabobank obviously working for their two sprinters, Robbie McEwen and Jan Koorts, but you can see the gap is still coming down 14 seconds. They will almost be on the tail of this leading group of 19 very shortly.
Now these are the leaders. Or rather, yes, they are the leaders, and we've got a Roslotto rider here tagged in on the back. It'll be Ferrigato. Andrea Ferrigato, he's been a passenger and hasn't been too keen on forwarding this race on, and Johan Museo now deciding it's time to come back here and assess the whole situation again. Well, here is the chase, and look at this now. It's down to 14 seconds. They can almost reach out and touch that leading group, but they certainly are making a meal of it, Paul.
Well, they are, these three teams now working together as allies, because we're getting to the very final closing stages of Ghent Wevelgem. Less than 20 kilometres remaining, and they know they've got to really put the hammer down to pull back this group of 19 who are at the front. And you can just see how strung out that main field is at the moment. The speed up around 45, 46 kilometres an hour, and they're almost on the tail of the 19 now.
Well, there they are. There's no longer any team cars, if there ever were any team cars, between these two groups. It's a matter now of just sprinting across that little bit of fresh air, but that's much easier said than done. It is a very difficult thing to do. Both the bunch and the pack, the leaders, are committed at full speed.
Sitting on the back there for TVM, wearing number 191, the winner of this year's Het Volk, Peter van Petegem, and also a stage of the Tour of Mallorca. Very happy, I think, just to sit in the slipstream of the rest of these riders. And Cyril Saugrand, the winner of that stage in the Tour de France, 221. riding for Cofidis, Lance Armstrong's team. He's quite happy too, just to keep a check on exactly what's happening with the main field.
And Sogra is a good sprinter, by the way, if he gets down to the finish, and he's kept his nose clean right now. He hasn't bothered by going up to the front and doing much work at all.
225, Philippe Gaumont, another rider on the Cofidis team. They're starting to drop to the back now. I think they might feel that they're about to get caught.
Well, if Museo thinks that, he's going to try and hurt them a bit more and break away. Museo starts the attack again. I think he's being chased down by Uchakov, the Polti rider, and that's the rock and roll shape of Henk Vogels, who's grabbed Uchakov's wheel. Now he's pulled some more life back into this breakaway just when the main field were almost on. There were 10 seconds.
Well, they're now on the very big, long, straight road into Wevelgem. They have to go through the town of Mainen just before the finish, which has got a lot of little turns. But this is the hardest part of the course for this leading group of 19 to survive, because it's a straight road almost all the way into Mainen, and the main field will see them, and they will get a lot of encouragement by the fact that they're just in front. That's Boldinger on the front riding for Polti, Uchakov moving up into third place, and I think now Museo starting to slit to the back there because he's not happy with the situation. He's all alone in this leading group of 19, as are the two Frenchmen sitting near the back as well.
And clearly the man to beat, because he is the world champion, he is a Belgian, and he's racing in Belgium today. Now let's have a look back. There were 10 seconds. Well, that's amazing. That attack by Johan Museo has opened up the gap. Now I would say we're nearer 20 seconds, maybe even further than that.
And I don't know if you caught the speed there, Phil. 51 kilometres an hour. That's over 30 miles an hour. And these riders still pushing. There's Van Heeswijk. But coming up now, last year's winner, Tom Steels, this time in the role of domestique. He's trying to slow down the chase behind the leading group of 19. He doesn't want them to get caught because he wants to give Johan Museo a chance to possibly walk away with the victory. If it comes back together, there is a man with another chance of winning today. Mario Cipollini, Super Mario, in his Italian champions jersey. But still, less of those three teams, and in fact another telecom team there, so it must have been something to do with that puncture of Eric Zabel that they have shut off and gone to the back.
That's a good point, and that may have cost the field the chance of catching up here, because we saw Zabel right up in the thick of the action, and all of a sudden on our screen came the word he'd had a flat tyre. We didn't actually see him stop, but he certainly has disappeared from the action. Now these are the riders who just a few moments ago seemed destined to be all wiped out, and now I think, Paul, are as free as birds.
Well, that's how the race can change, but they've still got to organise themselves, because this race can very often come back together in the last 4 or 5 kilometres. The hammer really down now, speeds up 30-35 miles an hour. Ferrigato, I think it was there from Roslotto, just having a little chance, one of the big revelations of last year, winning 2 events of the World Cup. He's covered by Wouters, the man from Lotto in the red and black jersey, wondering about the position of André Schmiel.
And the Polti boys, Baldinger and Uchakov, up near the front again. They seem to be working very well together right now.
It does come down to the sprint of this group of 19. I would think a man like Johan Capio must have a very good chance indeed. An excellent sprinter when it comes to the end of these races. Just 208 kilometres long today, and he knows exactly how to win the Belgian Classics. And Phil, it's really shot up 38 seconds now.
I think that's gone through the barrier now, and I think the race is won by this group. It's only a question of which rider, as Ludwig Willems goes through, number 17.
10 kilometres to go for these riders, Phil. I think they actually broke the 3 teams that were chasing them, because it was so close they could almost reach out and touch this leading group of 19, and now it's gone out to well over half a minute again.
That should be enough. Long straight roads as we race into Wevelgem now. The finish itself is at the end of a long straight, just into the town itself, just before the square there. They have the finish. After that it will become a little bit too dangerous. And it's been a sprinter's delight, this race, over the years, with the great Abdu Japarov and Cipollini often crossing swords. But I don't think that Cipollini is going to be involved in this one now, because the breakaway group of 19 men seems to have stolen the day. At the back of the group, the world champion, Johan Museo. Just in front of him is Uchakov. And this is the lineup as we go down now towards the finish. Schiria is number 88. We just got a glimpse of him. This is Boldinger.
Sierra, this is an interesting move now. A lot of these teams men like Sierra and Calcaterra riding for Saeco, they won't know exactly what to do. They're so used to working for Mario Cipollini when it comes down to the sprint, and here they are in the leading group of a classic. They've got to try and figure out and try to remember how to win for themselves. 48 seconds, so I think the main field, Phil, now has certainly given up.
Well, I would tend to agree right now because there's still counterattacks coming, but now we've got an attack here. This is one of the smaller teams, some Palmans. I think it's Peter Spanhoven who's just gone off the front. He's trying to get something. There's Tom Steele's marking everybody. And that, I think, is Covers, the Belgian rider on the Telecom team. But you see, they're all a little confused because this breakaway has got teammates up front, and the combination might not be the ones for their team to pull off the big win today.
Nicola Loader for MG Technogym, and those little attacks just go to show that the main chase in that group has gone off, but the attack's still coming thick and fast at the front here. This looks like Wouters having another go at the front there, but still being covered by the Saeco riders, and all the time these riders, I feel sure, over the last few kilometres will try to get clear because they don't want to leave it up to a sprint, and they would really very much like to bring it all together.
Well, that's Paolo Bonacciari who's come up for Saeco. And as we watch here, Bolninger and Ludwig Willems is also here. Well, they're all back together again anyway, and still the big danger man, Johan Museo, is on hand now in attack, and it looks like Schmill is gone on the left of the road. Little man with the big heart when it comes to classic racing. He watched them all come together and he's countered. Their counter-attack has been made by Gann, and I think that is Stuart O'Grady who's gone after him.
Well, in fact, that was Mark Wouters, the Lotto rider who leapt out there. Looked very much as if it was Andre Schmill, but it is Stuart O'Grady, I think, has gone to pull him back together there, getting onto his wheel there. It's so difficult to see the difference between O'Grady and Vogels. They've got the same position on the bike. They look very similar indeed. And in fact, that is Mark Wouters who's opened up a little bit of a gap, looking over his shoulder for some help. But the main field not too far behind. Cyril Saugrand now for a Cofidis. He's trying to get onto the wheel.
Well, I'll remain unconvinced it is O'Grady, Paul, because he was rocking a bit like the style of Henk Vogels. Anyway, he's an Australian. We'll settle for that just now until we can get down there. But we've got three riders out in front at the moment, and Cyril Saugrand of Cofidis. And yes, it is Henk Vogels who's joined in, and Mark Wouters is the other man. So Paul and I can call it a draw because I call Schmill instead of Wouters, and it doesn't matter.
Well, not at the end of the day. They're all riding to win this race, and it is Henk Vogels there. In fact, bearing a little bit of a plaster on his left shoulder there. Obviously some kind of tendinitis after that crash that he had in the Tour of Flanders just a few days ago. But the attack's still coming thick and fast. Everybody trying to get off the front of this group of 19, and these riders trying to open up a march. They really want to try and split it up. They don't want to leave it down to the sprint. Many of these riders not big winners in the ranks of professional cycling today, for the first time getting their chance of a crack at a classic.
And you notice the riders who are attacking have all got teammates in this breakaway, so if they do get caught, they're offering their teammate the chance to carry on and take the victory. That's how TVM worked it out in the Volt Classic, and now they're trying to do a similar tactic here. The teams must have watched the tape, I think.
Everything back together once more. You know, they really are trying all the time. This could be quite dangerous for this leading group of riders because they've lost the momentum now, and all the time sitting at the back, Johan Museo, all on his own in a group of 19, a very rare situation for him. And now it's a turn of Uchakov to try and get away from the leading group.
Just 6 kilometres to go. But now we've got Peter van Petergem, that's Ferrigato as well, who's just also moved up near the front. Big gaps here. Museo's having to completely alter his racing style here because he's overpowered by the fact he has no teammates. He's not taking part in any of attacks, but he's just watching all of the moves for the moment. And then maybe just near the end he'll give it one big go.
The only thing he can hope is that the other riders in this breakaway will keep it together, because they all do have teammates there, and it's up to them really to try and control the race. Museo, I think, will play a gamble today. He'll sit back and hope that it comes together to the finishing line here in Wevelgem as a big sprint, and then he will try and unleash the sprint which gave him 3 stage victories in this year's Ruta del Sol. But I think this time it is Stuart O'Grady who's leapt off the front.
Two very strong Aussies and having the best season so far as professionals. A couple of bronze medals on the track in the Olympic Games for Stuart O'Grady. He's been a world champion on the track in the team pursuit as well. He has a clutch of medals on the track, but he desperately wants to become a top road racing cyclist, and he's going a long way towards that ambition this year. There he is. The World Championship bands on the sleeves of his jersey. That's what you're allowed to put on forevermore if you've been a world champion at some stage of your career. And now, just 23 years of age, O'Grady has got the gap. He's not very far from the finish. This could be the win he wants.
Well, he's right in the streets of Mainen now. This is where he stands a chance of, in fact, putting himself with a little bit of a gap over the rest of that group. There are a lot of corners through the town here, and if he can just open up a gap big enough, he may well hold off this leading group now down to 18 men. You can see them in a very long straight line there, and looking up the road, O'Grady has about 100 metres. It's a long way to go, but he's the kind of rider, a pursuiter, who can just keep the effort just for 4 more kilometres.
Well, no Australian has ever won Ghent Wevelgem. Not even the great Phil Anderson, who's watching this race, by the way, today. And O'Grady now trying to become the first Australian man to win. Only 9 nations have shared in the victories in Ghent Wevelgem ever since this race began. But it's the Lotto boys who are trying to destroy his hopes and bring their men back into play. The trouble with the run into the finish, Paul, is these roads are very wide, very quick, and you're often in sight.
Well, now that we're coming out of Mainen, that is exactly what is happening. They'll get onto the longer, straighter roads. And you see, Museo hasn't given up.
No.
He's moved up into second position. He's letting the other teams in this breakaway do the work. They're trying to pull it back together for Andre Schmiel. And O'Grady there still insisting he mustn't look back. He must continue to keep that rhythm going. And if he could only hold on, if there's only a slight pause in this group behind, then he can pull it off.
Well, agonisingly slowly, but they are actually coming up to Stuart O'Grady. And he keeps looking over his shoulder. That doesn't help, really. He's just get on with his riding because they're going to come anyway. And so he may as well keep the pressure on and hope. Stuart O'Grady, and he looks over his shoulder yet again. But I think this time he's going to see them very close. There they are. And in fact, he's surrendered. And the Lotto team will have 3 men here. Schmiel, Willems and Wouters are the one who's done the damage. Museo took no part in that chase down, and there's the reason now. Now we have the attack again. And this time I'm going to go for Ludwig Willems.
I think very much likely to be him. Andre Schmiel will sit back, I think, and wait for the sprint. You can see all the time Johan Museo was sitting at the front. A great move there by Stuart O'Grady, but you can see the speed of this group. He's sliding backwards very quickly indeed as the riders from Saeco. That looks very much to me as if that's Mario Sierra bringing it back. And on his wheel is the former Russian rider, now Ukrainian Sergei Uchakov, and still the attacks coming. This is Boldinger.
Derek Boldinger, he was the rider in that very, very nasty accident, which unfortunately resulted in the death of Fabio Casatelli in the Tour de France a couple of years ago. And now he's fully recovered from his injuries and right on the front of the race at the minute.
Well, it looks as if Ghent Wevelgem is going to come down to a group at least from a sprint from a very big group indeed, as is normally the case. It won't be the massive bunch sprint that we're usually used to. And 1 or 2 very good sprinters in this group, and I think if it does come down to it, one man who must have a great chance is Johan Capio. He's been sitting at the back of the group for a while here, leaving the covering of all the attacks to his man in 3rd position there, Peter van Pietergem, wearing number 191. His job, I think, will be to make sure that nobody escapes in these final few kilometres, and when it does come down to the line, then that is the time when the big man Capio will go for it.
As an attack by Casarotto. No, Casarotto on the near side was reacting to attack that was going down the far side of the road. They're on the right. And it's Uchakov again who looks across to the Lotto boys. And this time it's Casarotto who's going to have a go. He's moved right out of line and gone across the road, being chased down by the Lotto. And that one hasn't worked either. Casarotto's also sat up. Museo just dodging in the wheels there, doing nothing. He's waiting.
Well, he's playing a very wise move indeed. He's covering the move, staying near to the front, not using an awful lot of energy. Now again, it looks as if Ludwig Willems wants to go down the left-hand side, and he's covered once again by one of the riders from Saeco. In fact, this is Mark Wouters who's gone. There are so many of these Lotto riders in the group. They're trying to break clear, but we haven't seen one attack come from Andre Schmiel, so he must be saving himself for the sprint.
Well, the 3 Lotto riders have really contributed to the breakaway, with the exception of Schmiel. Schmiel is the man I think they're trying to get down to the finish if the breakaways don't work. And he's the one that's staying out of the attacks, which are being shared by Mark Wouters and Ludwig Willems. Now we've got back to the Poulty boys, Dirk Boldinger, and another attack goes on the far side of the road again. And that once more, I think, is Casarotto.
Well, he was 5th in the Tour of Flanders, obviously in very good shape. 1 kilometre to go, and he was nailed down by Andrea Ferrigato.
So we're going to see a sprint from these 19 riders after all, or are we? Because there's another huge attack that's gone. This is an amazing race today. The Poulty boys are really trying to pull this race out. This is Uchikov now. Or is it Boldinger?
Very much like Boldinger, I think, and he's been covered by one of the TVM riders. That is their job, to make sure. In fact, that was Van Petegem who's leapt across the gap there, and it looks to me as if they may well have surprised the sprinters. Everybody's queuing up behind and nobody wants to do the work. 2 French riders there together on the left-hand side.
And in fact, on the far right of our picture now, it's Cyril Gaumont. Sogran who's trying to lead out Philippe Gaumont here, but now Johan Capio is making a run on the left as well. It's going to be a very tight finish. The 2 Toffeties boys have come now, and Sogran has dropped off, and Philippe Gaumont has got to the front. Philippe Gaumont is holding off the sprinters. Schmill was on his inside. Well, that is a turn up for the buck, and you're going to have to look back an awful long time to find out the last French winner of this event. In fact, you need to go back 20 years to Bernard Hinault as the last Frenchman to win this event, and that was a great sprint. In fact, it was Sogran who led out Philippe Gaumont, and Cofidis out of nowhere have got their first big win of the year. We saw a little bit of Sogran in the early attacks in that breakaway. We saw absolutely nothing of Philippe Gaumont. He was waiting for that one, and there he is, and he's going to be pretty happy with that, and so too is the Cofidis team. A great victory for them. Yeah, I thought they'd be delighted.
Henk, despite coming off in the Tour of Flanders, you were again at the front of the race today.
Yeah, I felt really good the first time over the Kemmelberg, and the second time I had struggled a little bit, but managed to stay in the front group. Unfortunately, we didn't have our sprinter with us, Monkesson. Monkesson went over with Museeuw on the first time, but the second time I don't know where he was. And it's a pity we didn't have him there, otherwise he would have won for sure. But unfortunately, me and Stewart had to go 4 kilometres to go and got caught, and I waited for the sprint. Just wasn't good enough in the sprint, but 5th I'm going to be happy with.
Strange tactics though coming into town there, because there was nobody really to control the race, to lead out, and it was a lot of attacks all the time.
Yeah, it was no real specialist sprinter. There was Grady there and Museeuw. I tried to stay with Museeuw, but the Cofidis guys whacked down the outside of on the left-hand side of the road and got the jump on us all, and good tactics by them.
And this is how Gaumont did it. A little bit of a crush at the start of the sprint there. Scampering up the outside goes Andre Schmill, and then the Cofidis boys tried to get control of the race. A very fine lead out here by Cyril Sogran. He's got Philippe Gaumont on his wheel. Peter Van Petegem tires, looks over his shoulder on the far right and finds he hasn't got Johan Capio on his wheel. That's Capio now working his way up around Sogran, who's dropping out of it while Schmill tries to challenge on the inside. But Gaumont had this race won a long way out, and on the line he won it by just about half a length over Schmill and Capio. And so the result confirmed. Philippe Gaumont joined the only other 2 Frenchmen to win this event, Jacques Anquetil and Bernard Hinault. He outsprinted Andre Schmill and Johan Capio, Sergei Uchikov 4th, Andrea Ferrigato 5th, and Henk Vogels, the Australian, was 6th with his teammate Stuart O'Grady. He finished in 7th place.